This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Hi, I'm Danny Pellegrino from the Everything Iconic podcast. And who doesn't love a classic burger from McDonald's? That's right, McDonald's classic burgers are hotter, juicier, and tastier than ever. The patties are cooked to juicy perfection. I love the cheese perfectly melted on top. I love the Big Mac that has a special sauce in every bite. I love the pillowy, soft, golden bun. So in the words of the Hamburglar, which I believe means grab McDonald's best burgers ever before Hamburglar does at a McDonald's near you.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I'm proud to offer premium wireless for just $15 a month. And I'm proud that we have thousands of 5-star reviews from customers like Dan D. in New York, who writes, I am satisfied customer. How can this only be $15? He wrote it in all caps. I needed you to feel it like he feels it. I hope I did that justice, Dan. And I hope that you try Mint too at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months required. New subscribers only. Renew for 12 months to lock in savings. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
It has been said that a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. But let me just be clear. It's not just men. Food is at the heart of everything, right? With Valentine's Day coming up and all the marketing that's inevitably popped up everywhere, I found myself wondering, why is food so integral to so many of our relationships? Whether it's sitting down for a Sunday lunch, sharing a bag of crisps at the beach, or gazing into each other's eyes over a candle-lit dinner, food is there. I'm Jaega Wise, and this is the Food Programme for BBC Radio 4. In this episode, I hope to understand more about why and how food has this capacity to connect, and the importance it has in our relationships. Can it really deepen feelings, help reconcile, and strengthen relationships? But I'm starting this exploration of food and love with, of course, aphrodisiacs, because they are the ultimate in love-making foods. I've come to a quirky East London cocktail bar that's not too far from my home. I've seen they're putting on an evening of absinthe and aphrodisiacs in honour of St. Valentine, with an added dash of black magic.
So this is where we can have a chat. The table is surrounded by erotica.
Very appropriate.
Yes. It is the only room in the venue that we have had to break up our guests from the merrymaking on the tables here. Yeah.
Well, it is very dark in here and quite cosy, so I'm sure it lends itself quite beautifully to that kind of behaviour. Alison Quirbuck is the co-owner and founder of the Last Tuesday Society in Hackney. And I really should set the scene. The bar is on the ground floor, but downstairs where we are is the Victor Wind Museum of Curiosities. And we are literally surrounded by glass cabinets containing some incredibly bizarre objects. I asked Alison to tell me more about the planned evening.
We have pulled out some very old love potion recipes to use as inspiration for some of the foods. One of my favorites is a 16th century recipe for a love jam that was written by Nostradamus. So the love jam recipe includes spices, warming spices like mace, cinnamon, clove. We've omitted the other, perhaps less delectable ingredients like an octopus arm and the blood of a sparrow.
So how popular is an evening based on love potions?
We did it last year as well, and it was a full house. Whether they're believing the love side of these potions or they're just interested in the history behind them, or they're just looking for a different date idea night out, people are definitely curious about the world of love magic and the past uses of these ingredients, because a well-stocked cupboard of herbs and spices is a valuable tool to anyone looking for an aphrodisiac and also for cooking and cocktail making. So combining the two is always fun.
Using herbs, spices and other foods and drinks to titillate goes back centuries. To whet our appetite a little more, I invited Dr. Jennifer Evans from the University of Hertfordshire to join us. She has spent years reading old medical texts to discover how aphrodisiacs were used during the early modern period. That's the 1500s through to the end of the 18th century.
The first major category of aphrodisiacs are things that warm the body. So spices like pepper, plants like rocket, ginger, galangal, cinnamon. And that's because it's thought that bodies that are what they call frigid are too cold to conceive. And for early modern people, arousal and sexual pleasure are all very closely connected to the ability to conceive. And that's particularly important for women who are thought in the 17th century to be colder naturally than men. So they might take longer to reach the point of climax than men do. So heating foods are quite good for helping women to achieve orgasm.
It's the most wild interview. Do it all with a straight face. Some of the foods that were written about back then still have rumours about them today. Things like oysters, chocolate, even asparagus.
Yes. So oysters are a fairly common food in the 17th century, and they're described by medical writers as aphrodisiacs because they're nutritious. So any food that is nourishing is thought to be an aphrodisiac in this era because food creates blood when it's consumed in the body, and blood is then concocted, as they call it, or changed into seed or seminal matter, and it's the movement of that through all the little windy ducts in the reproductive organs that kind of titillates and excites.
What about things like asparagus, things that look like physical body parts?
So early modern medical writers are quite keen on anything that fits what they call the doctrine of signatures, which is essentially the plant or substance shows you what it's good for. And in fact, we are sat right next to a portrait of one of the most famous plants to acquire a reputation because it looks like a penis, which is a form of orchid. It's called dogstones in the 17th century, and it's widely known as an aphrodisiac. It has an erect fleshy stem and two little bulbous roots at the bottom, and so it looks the part, but it also applies to things like parsnips, carrots and asparagus.
In your research, were there foods that came up time and time again?
Yes, the warming spices like the ones you're going to be putting in your drinks, they're really popular. One of the major categories of aphrodisiacs are called windy meats. They're beans and peas, suitable for helping men to sustain an erection. And I was interested that you talked about sparrows because they come up both as a nourishing food, but also Nicholas Culpeper, who's a radical printer in the 17th century, he says that you should consume small birds and creatures that are addicted to venery because they will help work that in the human that eats them, and in that list is quails, partridges and sparrows.
So maybe I should add the sparrow to the cocktail as well.
Yes. And what about aphrodisiacs in the context of gender? Is it more male specific or more female specific?
So sex is gendered in the sense that some aphrodisiacs in the 17th century work on the male body but not on the female body. So the windy meats, the peas and chickpeas and things, they're much more specifically for the male body. The way that erections are understood in the 17th century requires wind. My favourite medical writer describes the penis as a windsock that you need to inflate. But windy meats are very dangerous for the womb. So wind in the womb is thought to cause disruption and possible miscarriage. So women are supposed to stay away from those. However, the rest are applicable to both male and female bodies.
Dr. Jennifer Evans from the University of Hertfordshire and Alison Crawbuck from the Last Tuesday Society. It may all be placebo, but I get the sense that some lust and possibly even love will be conjured up on that evening of absinthe and aphrodisiacs. My next stop is further west, and we've come to a canal right next to Paddington Station. It's overlooked by high-rise offices, but down by the water is the London Shell Company. So, we're better to uncover the mystery of how food is able to incite romantic love on a floating restaurant that specialises in seafood.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Goodness me. And also very hidden away, but also very central at the same time.
Yeah, did you come on the Elizabeth line?
Came on the Elizabeth line. I'm being shown on board by co-owner Harry Lobeck. The family-run company owns 2 barges, which they've converted into restaurants.
Yeah, so this is Static a la carte, and the one next door, that's, set menu, cruising restaurant, cruises from here to Camden Lock and back.
So you're floating as you dine? Oh, that's very romantic.
Yeah, it's really...
That's very
I think,
nice.
people have said one of the most romantic restaurants in London, I think, possibly the UK. I mean, we've been fully booked for about a month and a half for Valentine's Day over there.
So what's your secret?
I don't know. I think the restaurants are very unique. They're right on the water, so your feet at the moment are below the canal levels. So as you can see out the windows, you've got that kind of rippling effect of the water going past.
There's almost a bit of escapism about it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's. I think that's dead romantic. I don't know about you. Yeah.
You're giving me the feels now. Harry shows me to a table in the bow of the canal boat, and we're joined by head chef Finney, who's brought for me to try one of the most popular dishes on Valentine's Day.
These are really cool oysters from Ireland, from Donegal, and these will be on the menu all the time, and they'll be on the menu on Valentine's Day this year. Have you had oysters before?
I have had oysters before. The texture of oysters at times has been not amazing.
Can we talk you through our technique?
Yeah.
Please. I would love to know how I should eat oysters.
So I think people often think you should just swallow them straight away, and that's like not the case at all. You should definitely put it in your mouth, chew it a little bit, and then swallow it.
What I'd recommend doing is just... Yeah, go on, I'm going to pass you that one. Have a taste of that liquor, just sip it, and that's going to...
Ooh, salty.
Very salty, right? And that's going to season your mouth, so you're now a little bit prepared for what's to come.
So you shouldn't go cold oyster, you should go sip it first and then... Okay, let's crack on.
And just chew. Keep chewing.
That's really delicious. It tastes so unbelievably fresh. I understand now why everyone loves oysters so much. So... You lot must see it all here in terms of relationships.
Yeah, we had this lovely lady hire the boat out to propose to her boyfriend. We had to take the boat out and we met them in Little Venice as they were walking down the towpath. She tried to coax him onto the boat. When he finally did climb aboard, she got down on her knee and proposed to him on the front deck, so on the bow of the boat. And then they span round and came back to our mooring, and all their friends were waiting there for them and had a huge party.
Have you ever had any bad ones?
I think we've had awkward ones. I mean, I've recommended that they maybe propose before they get on the boat, because obviously if you're on the cruising boat, you can get off, but nobody gets off. And then we have to leave you in Regent's Park.
So we're exploring the relationship between food and love, and we've been wondering, is it biological or is it environmental?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's probably more environmental. It totally depends where you are, who you're with. It's the whole setting, what you're drinking. Your server is great and they look after you well.
I'm just so pleased we agree on this, because I'm front of house and Finney's kitchen, and although I don't think there are divides in our restaurant, but usually chefs will tell you that it's the ingredient and it's like the way they've cooked things and the quality of their sourcing. But I think it's a combination of the three, and when you get all three things in harmony, it's perfect. Yeah.
So my final question to you is, when you were setting up the restaurant, did you have romance in mind?
No, but setting up a restaurant and building something from scratch in the first place is an incredibly romantic thing to do. And I feel like that appeals to romantics. And I feel that the people that come to our restaurants in particular enjoy the quirky aspect of it, enjoy the fact that it reeks of honesty, it reeks of people working really hard, enjoying what they do, and that breeds romance in itself.
Harry and Finney at London Shell Company. I wonder if they'll get anyone proposing on board this Valentine's. Most eating that happens in relationships, though, doesn't happen in a seafood restaurant overlooking the shimmering waters of a London canal. Let's be frank, it's a million miles from this. But can food still be a hook or a connector when you're both working flat out and meals are less of an event and more of a daily burden? I wanted to find out how a chef might manage all that and got in touch with Spanish chef José Pizarro, who's been in a long-term relationship with his partner Peter Meades for 14 years.
I think food can be definitely one of the things that we enjoy more together.
We're recording this over a video call because Jose and Peter are abroad. But for people who haven't heard of José Pizarro, he is one of the most celebrated Spanish chefs working in the UK and has 7 restaurants and a guest house.
The time that we are cooking, the time we are in the kitchen, the time that we are entertaining, the shopping, the deciding what is going to be for dinner. Food is what we love, and food is love.
Peter, we should tell listeners, you're a psychotherapist. I have read studies or surveys that say that couples who cook together have better relationships. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, there is this kind of idea of food as a kind of love language. I mean, I think any kind of shared activity for couples or anyone in a relationship is important to find shared meaning. But cooking particularly, I think, because, first of all, the language that's used around love is similar. You know, people talk about love and food as being comforting, sweet, spicy, hot, bitter. Excuse me. Sometimes, only sometimes. And so that's interesting in itself, but also that love can be expressed through food as well. And I actually think that's something that we experience. I mean, Jose, is very creative and sometimes isn't the best communicator. He's completely in his own world sometimes. But the love can be expressed through the care that's taken over the ingredients and the time that's taken over preparation and, the conversations you have while you're preparing food. So I think it's a fantastic pastime for any couple, really. For us, certainly, it's vital to the survival of the relationship. And I can see why it's encouraged. Yeah.
For me, because I grew up with food so important and the food bring people together. I was not allowed to be in the kitchen because my mom always throw me away. This is my time to be alone. Please go away. But always was that time that everyone was together. And the love she put in the food was the love I put in my restaurant. I put to my clients. I put to my family. I put to Peter. To do an omelette, it's very simple and can be done very quick. But you can feel when someone make a simple omelette with care, And it's how I cook when we are together. It's that kind of feeling I want to give to Peter because he's been all day working and or whatever, and I need to comfort him. It's not about just beating the egg, blah, 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 and done. It's the care just to say, okay, I'm here, and I want to be with you.
And that's a conscious choice. I mean, I think that's a decision. I don't think you can achieve that through fast food, particularly. It does feel very much like Jose, because of his sort of childhood on a farm and his connection with the land and with the ingredients, sort of appreciates and understands the value of them and has helped me understand that in a way that I never did really before meeting him. I mean, I used to eat really quickly, and that's one of the main things Jose's really taught me. I mean, technically, you could call it mindful eating, but he really taught me to slow down. He would get really cross if I was eating, too quick. He'd sort of say, why don't you taste the grapes, taste them. And I was thinking, controlling, very controlling, telling me to slow down. But actually, there's something in it. Savouring, and connecting with the food changes the relationship with the food and then with each other, because there's a sort of valuing of the kind of difference and appreciating of the similarities, yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for talking to me about food and love. José Pizarro and Peter Meades. Of course, for a great number of people in the UK, Valentine's supper is now an annual feast laid on by the supermarkets in their ever-popular ranges of dine-in meals for two. Some will smirk, but I'm not surprised that this particular marketing is so successful. Could there be anything more romantic than sliding off a cardboard sleeve or peeling back that cellophane on a ready-prepared meal that will take just minutes to heat up, leaving the rest of your evening stress-free with time for whatever you like? We thought we'd speak to someone who's eaten more of these meals than most.
My name is Callum Black. I'm the Food and Drinks Testing Manager at the Good Housekeeping Institute.
Callum's job is to test and rate food produced by the supermarkets with a panel of their readers. The best ones get the Good Housekeeping Institute mark of approval.
For Valentine's Day this year, we spent 3 to 4 full days cooking and eating. Something we saw a lot of this year was pre-cooked sous vide meats. So they're being cooked on site by the manufacturers for 8 to 12 hours sort of thing. So slow-cooked shins, slow-cooked duck legs was a really popular one for us this year. You're getting hard-working, quite low-cost cuts of meat that basically give you a real premium and gastro feel.
Waitrose told us its offer, which includes 3 courses and a bottle of wine for £20, is their most popular dine-in meal of the year. And this is the 6th year they've been selling them.
I saw an interesting stat, which was 2023, 62% of couples said they were staying in, which, if you can see that as a trend, you don't have to work overly hard to be making these products appealing to people. As long as they're affordable, indulgent enough. And I saw a lot of very premium alcohol coming through this year alongside, which just makes the deal even more attractive.
So does eating these carefully curated meals designed for romance leave Callum feeling loved?
I can't say after 3 years of doing this job, there's many things that bring me the warm, fuzzy feeling of being loved. But if we're talking about a really good, indulgent chicken Kiev, you're probably getting the closest you're going to get.
Callum Black, Food and Drinks Testing Manager at the Good Housekeeping Institute. To me, any romantic appeal of these ready meals comes with how stress-free they are. But perhaps they do mean we miss out on that slowing down to cook and eat that José and Peter spoke so fondly about. Now, time to bring some science to the table. Do we know what the food is doing to our brains when we eat with someone we love? Professor Charles Spence is the head of the Cross-Modal Research Laboratory at the University of Oxford. He's interested in how people perceive the world around them, in particular how our brains manage to process the information from each of our different senses. He also works with chefs to design dining experiences that can supercharge the senses. So does he think food can stimulate feelings of love?
Absolutely, I think, via various means as well. Probably my favourite has to be through misplaced arousals, perhaps the best way to describe it, where I was used to use as my technique of seduction.
Go on.
Which was sort of feeding the young ladies of my acquaintance extremely hot, spicy curries and pasta arrabbiatas, Thai green curries, that kind of thing. Intuitively at first, but I think what was happening there is if these very hot curries would induce feelings of heat, of fluster, of pupil dilation in my guests, there was a good chance that they would misattribute those bodily sensations for, wow, this guy is so good looking. Look at the way he makes me feel. You don't need food to do it. There's been lots of sort of research in the social psychology on proposing to people on wobbly rope bridges or in scary cinema movies. And in all those cases, people are likely to be more aroused than normal. And in all those cases, that arousal gets misattributed to the person who's doing the asking.
Charles told me there's also been research carried out into the truth behind beer goggles. Drinking can make people rate others as more attractive. And he says there's even been an experiment involving rats and oysters.
So there hasn't been that much research, scientific research, that is, assessing the impact of oyster eating on human fecundity. Nevertheless, there are a couple of animal studies that give us a hint. One study, rats were fed a zinc supplement. Zinc is something you find both in semen and in oysters, and that led to increased romantic activity, shall we say. And then in another study, rabbit bucks were documented to have an increased sperm count when they were fed some amino acids, which are again common to oysters and to semen. So not a lot out there, but what there is hints that Casanova and those who followed him might increase their activity, shall we say, through eating oysters.
Are there any other things we can do that might trigger feelings of love?
A couple of other things one could do from the field of social psychology. One is around embodied cognition, and that is namely that if we hold a warm or a hot drink, cup of tea or coffee, say, a mulled wine maybe, that physical warmth we feel translates into us rating other people as looking warmer and hence more approachable, nicer. And so that can help to improve our interpretation of others' feelings and emotions, and hence that would, if anything, help.
Professor Charles Spence from the University of Oxford. One thing we've not really touched on is other kinds of love. Love for your friends, love for your family. Last year, food writers Clare Finney and Skye McAlpine wrote on the topic, how food and love are so intertwined in their relationships. We got together to share thoughts, and they started by telling me about their respective books. Skye spoke first about her book, A Table Full of Love.
I start with sort of saying it's a book about love more than it is a cookbook. It's obviously a recipe book. But the premise of the book is that every time we cook for someone, it is an expression in some way or another of love. So whether that's a more romantic kind of love or unconditional love, perhaps for your children, or friendship or self-love, I kind of explore the world of food through that. Ultimately, cooking for someone is an act of caring, even if it's as simple as making a cup of tea. Why does it feel so special when someone brings you a cup of tea when you're feeling a bit down or something? It's just tea, and we can all kind of really make our own cups of tea. But there's something about preparing for someone and being prepared for that is a very special feeling.
So Claire, I suppose, same question to you. I mean, tell me all about your book.
So my book it's an exploration of food and love using kind of my life as the through line, but interviewing lots of people along the way. So I interviewed Diana Henry about food and divorce and about food and motherhood. I interviewed Bea Wilson about sugar and the use of sugar to show love and the complications that come with that. So it was a really lovely way of amassing all these different perspectives and different stories into one hopefully cohesive narrative.
We talk about meals having the power to forge relationships and bring people closer together. Do these meals have to be glamorous?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I've been interviewing chefs about the kind of meals that are definitive for their romantic relationships for a piece for Valentine's Day. And not one has chosen a food that is remotely complicated. Most of them are homely meals. Most of them are comfort foods. It's nice to create a sense of ceremony because that in itself makes the meal special, like the lighting of the candles and the setting of the table. But I don't think the food itself has to be particularly fancy.
And Skye, this brings us, I suppose, to your question about food and self-love. You've written a whole chapter of recipes designed for just one person, including desserts. Can I ask why you made that choice?
I find, for me, it's easy and intuitive to cook for others, and that gives a purpose to the meal. But so often when it's just me for supper, then I'll revert back to not really bothering to kind of have a proper meal. So I wanted to in some way explore those slightly more complicated emotions around food and also offer some inspiration for getting into the habit of cooking for ourselves and taking care of ourselves. So there's not a sort of hierarchy of meals in which, I don't know, cooking for your family or cooking for someone that you care about or cooking for friends is very important and therefore worthy of lots of effort and something delicious, and cooking for ourselves is somehow not worthy of that. I'm kind of breaking it down because it still needs to be practical. I love the romantic idea of like, supper. For me, I want to take the time, but time is a precious resource, so probably don't want to take all day. So finding kind of practical dishes that I can really enjoy and feel special and have that ritual of a meal, but also that work well for one person and don't feel lonely, but feel appropriate and suited.
Claire, I mean, with your book, you did such a personal deep dive. What did you learn?
The way that love can be expressed through food is so diverse. And the more I looked and the more I had this lens in the world of food and love, I saw it everywhere. The way people show attention to detail and the consistency and the way they express themselves and their character. My boyfriend is quite a stickler for ratios, and that's such a sign of how measured he is as a man. Then you have somebody getting the ratio just right for your cup of tea, and I think you can really see it everywhere and in every meal if you look hard enough.
The perfect example, you said it earlier with a cup of tea. I mean, the act of giving someone a cup of tea when they're in distress, when they're at the height of joy, that act says 1,000 words.
Yeah. This weekend, I visited my grandma, and she and my granddad used to have a cup of tea and a ginger biscuit in bed every morning. And she told me she still has it every morning. He passed away 4 years ago, and she still has a cup of tea and a ginger biscuit in bed, and it's her time with him. And she is religious about it, and she sometimes does feel guilty that she takes that time for herself, even though he's not there. But he is there, really. In the act of her having a cup of tea and a ginger biscuit, he is there. And it was like, oh, so beautiful.
Claire Finney, author of Hungry Heart, and before her, the food writer Skye McAlpine. That's it for today. If this episode has inspired you to get cooking for someone you love, be it a romantic partner, someone in your family, a friend, or even yourself, do let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Our email address is thefoodprogram@bbc.co.uk, or you can join us on social media. We are at BBC Foodprog.
On This Cultural Life from BBC Radio 4, leading artists and performers reveal their creative inspirations.
I saw something that was so beyond what I was being taught at school.
Discuss their best-known work.
I do get messages all the time saying this is our life. The Handmaid's Tale is already here.
And reflect on their own cultural lives.
Rock stars need to be simply drawn. They can't be too complex.
Join me, John Wilson, and my guests including Nick Cave, Stephen Fry, Margaret Atwood, Florence Pugh, Paul McCartney and Whoopi Goldberg.
I always knew I was going to be a character actor. I'd never thought I was going to be a famous movie person.
This Cultural Life. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Hi, I'm Danny Pellegrino from the Everything Iconic podcast. And who doesn't love a classic burger from McDonald's? That's right. McDonald's classic burgers are hotter, juicier, and tastier than ever. The patties are cooked to juicy perfection. I love the cheese perfectly melted on top. I love the Big Mac that has a special sauce in every bite. I love the pillowy, soft, golden bun. So in the words of the Hamburglar, which I believe means grab McDonald's best burgers ever before Hamburglar does at a McDonald's near you.